a little bit of a later start than usual with my news of the week on Sunday, but nevertheless, here we are with the news of the week on this Sunday evening. And usually the weekend edition of News of the Week, there tends to be not as much news as you would see on the weekday edition, but this weekend is a little bit of an exception, and that there's actually going to be 13 things that I'm going to be talking about. Although some of the things that I'm going to be talking about, I could have maybe combined them into one bullet points instead of separating into a couple of bullet points. And right near the end of this News of the Week episode, I'm going to be talking about something that I actually found on Reddit that I feel like it's something that I kind of want to mention, including something that I'm going to have to create a little bit of a rant, because this is something that I talk about in the last News of the Week episode, and I feel like some of the fans didn't listen to me when I talk about this, and I feel like I'm going to emphasize again, and hopefully some of these fans will understand that this is something that they need to really stop. But we start off with Bruce Arena saying that New England will add a DP forward and a defender in the offseason. Now, I understand the fact that the refs want to add another DP because they do have a DP spot open. Although, I'm kind of surprised that he says that he wants a forward as their last DP of this team, considering they already have a DP forward in Gustavo Bo, and they also have a good backup striker in the team in Teal Bunbury, and they also have a good central attacking midfielder DP named Carlos Hill. And I just feel like, when you see teams that usually how they fill these free DP spot, they usually fill these free DP spot by having a DP forward, a DP central attacking midfielder that is the playmaker, or they have a winger DP or a midfielder DP that either can basically they create some chances on the wing area, or could really dominate the midfield, or could be like a versatile player where he can not only be a playmaker, but he can also get back and clean up the mess that his team could be in if they had a bad turnover. But that doesn't seem like that is on the mind of Bruce Arena, and that he wants to have another DP forward. And I feel like if New England is smart about that, and if Bruce Arena is smart about this, he probably would think about getting a winger and a midfielder. I think for New England, their attacking front is very decent, but if they want to go into the next level, I feel like they could have maybe looked into the winger position, which is kind of a little bit of a weakness in terms of the attack, and also in the midfield position, and especially a midfielder that can not only be a playmaker, but also could really protect the back line. Because as he also mentioned, he is looking for a defender heading into this off season, and that it's clear that New England, if there is a big weakness on this team last season, it was their defense. I mean, out of the 7 teams that made it the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, they gave up the most goal out of those 7 teams. Now, I know a lot of that has to do when Brad Friedel was in charge, and they were giving up goals for fun when he was in charge, but still, you still need to fix that defense that at times were very shaky last year, and it's clear that they are looking to try to do that, but at the same time maybe get a DP kind of midfield that can protect that back line a little bit. Now, Inter Miami is actually in negotiation with Colombian forward Roger Martinez, and I mentioned in the last episode how Inter Miami was rumored to get him from Club America, and I originally kind of just make fun of it and say that, well, this is kind of like one of those rumor that Inter Miami seems to be talking about, but in the next couple of days, it's just going to fizzle out. But to my biggest surprise, this news were popped up again today, and it seemed like Inter Miami is really in business in terms of finding their goal scorer. And I'm assuming if they're going to sign him, it's going to be as a DP, and that should fill up all the TP spot from Inter Miami. And I know some of the fans down there are going to be a little bit disappointed that they were hoping it's going to be a big European name, but I don't think getting a guy that can definitely score you goals in MLS is a bad thing too. I mean, I know Club America fan says that he's been struggling when he was with them, and that he hasn't really filled up the potential that Club America paid him in the first place. But at the same time, he's also a very decent striker, and that I have heard he was an upcoming striker when he was with the Colombian national team. And if he can, of course, create that same form he was with his country when he comes to MLS, and that maybe this is just a scenario where if he can have a bit of a change of scenery, come to MLS and discover the form that he had earlier in his career before moving to Club America, this would be an absolute good signing for Inter Miami. So we'll see whether or not if this rumor is going to continue to stay afloat, and that how much exactly Inter Miami is going to try to get Roger Martinez. I'm assuming it's probably going to be a lot, because Club America is one of those Liga MX teams that don't like to sell their best players, and if they're going to sell their best player, they make sure that it's going to be more expensive than the one that they first bought them. And when they first bought Roger Martinez, it was a very, very expensive price. Now, LAFC decided to sign another Uruguayan, and this time they decided to sign a U23 Uruguayan midfielder, Francisco Janella, for $2.5 million. Originally, when I look at this, I was thinking straight off my mind that this might be a replacement for Lee Gwyn, although the way that he plays and the position that he plays doesn't really kind of fit into that role that Lee Gwyn was with LAFC. But I guess it's also another situation where LAFC is showing the rest of the league that, hey, we're not afraid to spend money, even if we need to spend money to booster of what already is an incredible deep team. We are going to do that by signing this guy for $2.5 million. So, yeah, this is definitely another situation where I said before of LAFC, the rich just get richer for them, and that they are really just building up their squad and trying to finally achieve that ultimate price that they came short last season, which is winning MLS Cup. There's a report that MLS team have offered Independiente $6 million for winger Cecilio Dominica, and I'm not quite sure exactly which MLS team decided to offer him, but when you look at this kind of rumor, you would think maybe Atlanta United might be the MLS team, because he's Paraguayan, and Atlanta United is known to sign Paraguayan player and known to also sign Independiente kind of player, with them already getting Ezequiel Barco from Independiente before. But $6 million for a guy that is already 25 years old, and I also heard that Independiente is going to hold 75% of rights off him. Yeah, this is definitely kind of a risky move for a team, although I heard he's a very decent player, and that if he does come to MLS, he's going to really do well in this league. But if you're a club that wants to buy a talented South American player and you want to sell them off, the fact that you have to pay $6 million to try to get him, and knowing the fact that you're going to, when you do sell him, 75% of that transfer fee will go to Independiente, I'm not quite sure you are going to be a team that want to take him. I mean, unless if you're planning to keep him for a long term and not selling him to Europe, maybe this would definitely be a good deal, consider, as I heard from what I heard, he was very decent when he was with Independiente, and he should do very well if he does come to MLS. But we still don't know exactly which team decided to offer that, and until we do know, maybe we'll see whether or not if he's going to be coming to MLS. Now, SKC earlier this week obviously made the biggest move they have made the biggest move this offseason by getting Alan Pulido on a transfer fee of upwards to $10 million. Well, it seemed like they are ready to splash the cash again, and they are looking to splash $2.5 million on Red Star Belgrade striker Richmond Boakye. And it is pretty clear that SKC, they are really desperate in terms of trying to get back to the playoffs. Like I said, with SKC this season, I thought this was going to be a rebuilding year where they're going to be replacing their old core and bringing in a new kind of core player to solidify them for the upcoming years, but it seemed like they are getting very desperate right now, that they are willing to try to spend more cash in terms of trying to get some decent players so that they can make the playoffs, which I really like when a team decided to do that, because it clearly showed that this team really have a lot of ambition of being a team that not only want to compete in MLS, but make sure they get back to the playoffs after they missed in the previous year. And right now, SKC seems like one of those teams that are desperate in terms of splashing the cash in the offseason and trying to get back into the playoffs. Now, whether or not if they're going to get him, and whether or not if he's going to be kind of like a secondary striker to Alan Pulido, we shall see how that is going to be the case, and whether if all these moves that SKC had made in the offseason is going to pay off heading into the upcoming year, we don't know. But given the fact that SKC, when you look at some of the signings that they have made in the past couple of years, usually most of them does pay off, and it's definitely a credit to this front office and also Peter Vermes just hitting all the right buttons in terms of trying to replace either an older player in their team with another decent player, or the fact that they really need to spend money to trying to accelerate this rebuild so that they can make the playoffs heading into next season. There's a report that the Whitecaps is going to sign Lucas Cavallini to a 4-year deal and pay $6 million, although this is actually not really a report anymore, as it seemed like the Whitecaps just announced a couple of hours ago, or just announced when I was finished writing this board, that they are going to be announcing that they're going to sign Lucas Cavallini tomorrow, and that it seemed like that transfer fee will be around $6 million, and that this is also another example of the Whitecaps, they're getting desperate in terms of trying to accelerate this rebuild. And, well, actually, most importantly for the Whitecaps, they're desperate in terms of just trying to get this rebuild going after last season. They tried to get the rebuild going, and it did not work whatsoever. And it's also a sign where the Whitecaps are desperate in terms of spending cash so that they can finally get a goal scorer that they've been missing for the past couple of seasons. And I really believe if Lucas Cavallini is going to be their goal scorer, you can definitely look at a guy that can definitely score at least 10 or 15 goals this season, and that I think it's definitely worth the money for the Whitecaps in order to pay this guy. Now, there is actually a report, and I can't believe this is actually true. There is a report that Piatti is looking to go back to Argentina, and this is not a report talk about going back to Argentina after the end of the 2020 season, but it says he is looking to get back to Argentina this offseason. Now, of all my years doing News of the Week and seeing all these rumors that has kind of either just blow up in front of everybody's faces, or the fact that it kind of eventually fizzle out a little bit, this is one of the most ridiculous rumor I've ever heard before. And it's just something that sounds very fishy, because first of all, Ignacio Piatti was rewarded a contract extension, and Montreal just exercised his contract a couple of weeks ago. So why in the world are we getting reports that he is leaving Montreal this offseason? Like, I just don't see how is there a possibility of Montreal potentially seeing Piatti leaving their team after they just signed him to a contract extension. Like, the only way I can think of is just either they decided to cut ties with him in the offseason, or the fact that he probably could be injured for the rest of the season, and by the time his contract ends, that is when he of course leave Montreal. Or the most ridiculous thing that I don't think this is going to be true, but I'm just going to mention it either way, is that Piatti basically just say, well, I'm going to retire from the Impact after I sign this contract extension, and I'm going to just unretire myself once that contract extension expire, which is the most ridiculous thing will happen, and I don't think Piatti is going to do that, consider he's very loyal to the Montreal Impact. So yeah, this rumor I can officially say that is 99.9% not true, and I expect Piatti to stay with Montreal. And if this is something that I think we could potentially hear at the end of the season, when potentially Piatti will be leaving Montreal and will not be returning for future year, which makes sense because he is getting older and that he always have a desire to return to Argentina to retire in his career. But right now, it just sounds really ridiculous with the way that he just got a contract extension a couple of weeks ago, and that this is what has just pulled up after that. Now let's talk about a little bit about a couple of players that have their contract extended by their respective club, and this is where I could have easily kind of just put a list of players that had their contract extended, but instead I'm just going to put it in an individual bullet point. So first of all, we have RSL signed a new 4-year contract to defender Aaron Herrera, which it's great that they decided to extend him. Consider, I think he was definitely a very decent defender for them, and that hopefully they can continue to develop him, and that they might think about selling him in a couple of years to earn some profit. The Columbus Crew also resigns Hamilton and Lamson, which, you know, both of these players are good utility player and good backup kind of players. So it's good that the Crew, of course, decided to keep both of them for some depth piece. The Galaxy, of course, resigned defender Daniel Sturridge, which, you know, unless if he's going to be kind of like a backup defender and a guy that comes off the bench, I think that's a decent kind of signing. But if he's going to be a regular starter like the last couple of seasons, then this is probably not a good signing, because Daniel Sturridge, you know, I think he's a decent backup kind of defender, but if he's going to be a defender that starts your team week in and week out, then yeah, that is not a great idea, and it's clear that you need to find better defender. And what a way to say that a team that needs to find better defender than talking about the Galaxy, that I've been mentioning it many times before in my video. But the biggest one in terms of the re-sign this week is that TFC have re-signed Michael Bradley via a TAM contract, and that this is definitely a big win for TFC, who, you know, they want to get Michael Bradley back for another year. And even though he has started to kind of decline, and that his age definitely have shown in the last couple of years, or even just this last season, they still want to secure him, but at the same time they don't want to pay a DP contract. And that this is also kind of something that I think this might sounds ridiculous, but, you know, maybe sometimes not winning MLS Cup could actually be a good thing for you, because, you know, if TFC would have won MLS Cup, which would be great because they will remember as the team that was the champions of MLS in 2019, but they'll also be a team that remember that they are going to be stuck with one of the most obnoxious and one of the worst contract in MLS by giving Michael Bradley $6 million when he is clearly declining, and that could really hurt TFC down the line. And yeah, I mean, I guess maybe that's the good thing about TFC, and the fact that, you know, now they don't really have to just completely overpay a guy by a country mile, but instead now sign him on a TAM contract just because they weren't the champion of MLS in 2019. But finally, in terms of the final two news, these are something that I actually found on Reddit that I kind of want to mention in the news of the week that was kind of notable. We start off with the Galaxy naming their safe standing section the Victoria block. If you wonder why they exactly named that name as their supporter section, well, that's because the supporter section behind or the streets behind the Galaxy supporter section is actually called Victoria Street, so that's why they of course name it Victoria Block, which is something that we've seen many teams around the world do. They usually either name a stand after a famous person, or a stand named after a district or a street that is right behind them, and the Galaxy is no exception to that. And finally, the thing that I am going to mention is going to be something that, you know, in the beginning of the video, I talked about how I was going to create a little bit of a mini rant, talk about something that I mentioned before, and that I feel like some people don't understand what I talked about before and have to create this ridiculous thing, and then it's time to stop, and this is what it is. The Chicago Fire, or actually, it's not the Chicago Fire, but there's currently a change.org petition for the Chicago Fire to redesign their logo. I mean, I said before how I feel like, as much as I know the logo is bad, and that I know fans are going to just continue to talk about this logo being one of the worst logo that is ever created in MLS throughout the season, I feel like it's time for fans to just move on. And right now, I just don't understand why this Fire fans have so... First of all, I just want to say that I'm not going to speak this in terms of the majority of Fire fans. I know this is not a majority Fire fans issue, but there are some Fire fans that still take this as an issue, and this is just a message for them, where I feel like for them, they first need to move on from this issue, because it's clear that the team is not going to do anything, and it's also clear that just because you put a petition at change.org doesn't mean that the team is going to listen. And in fact, 99% of petition on change.org doesn't really do anything. I just find it funny how this website still kind of exists, even though, you know, it doesn't really do much changes as it says on the domain name. But I feel like for some of those Fire fans that still complain about their logo being one of the worst in MLS, you know, they got to realize that their biggest problem right now is not their logo. Their biggest problem right now is the front office, which seems like they are just slacking once again and decide to not really think about getting a sporting director that they need to, a new head coach, and also potentially replace a couple of players that they cut ties in the off season. So yeah, I mean, right now when I look at the Fire, and for a team that was saying that this is a new era for this team, and that they of course are moving back to Soldier Field and moving back to where the Chicago Fire really defined themselves as a Chicago soccer team, this is definitely not looking good with the way that they've been promised that there's going to be some changes, and that this team is going to be going back to its glory days. I mean, again, with all these kind of rumors that has happened that kind of just fell flat in their face, and that they just haven't really have a lot of structure with no sporting director, no head coach, and having had any signings to replace guys that they cut ties with in the offseason, I am very concerned heading into this upcoming season for the Fire, because as much as they can talk about all this new era stuff and talk about how they're finally trying to recapture the fan base of Chicago, as long as you continue to not really change the squad and just hire a head coach that could definitely lead this team into a good direction into this new era, nothing is going to change with this team. Like, fans are not going to show up at Soldier Field just because of the fact that the team is moved back closer to Chicago, and that fans only show up for this team if this team is going to be good again. We saw it back in 2017 when they were good, and how much the fans show up to Fire's game, and we saw how for the last couple of years when they really suck, and how nobody really shows up to those games. So yeah, you know, the bottom line is fans need to move on from this whole Fire logo kind of issue, and I know I'm going to continue to hear this because that's the way it is, but seriously, they just need to move on and focus on what is going on with the team and some of the things that they need to kind of move on from this new era. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. As usual, if I have missed any important news on this board, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.